please welcome the founder and editor of Philly Love Notes, Emma Fried-Cassorla.
Okay. Philly Love Note number 66, published September 12th, 2012 by Dan McQuaid. My love note. 12 years and about 50 pounds ago, I was a pretty decent runner. My times were good. I won a few cross-country meets. I never got hurt, but I was hardcore. By senior year of high school, I savored every minute of running. I loved running in the woods in Philadelphia and Bucks County, on the streets near the Northeast Airport, and on tracks all over. Unfortunately, running competitively for 10 or so years killed my spirit. I fell out of it in college and I found new interests. I dropped my favorite hobby for reasons I still don't understand. A few years ago, I got fired, got dumped, and most importantly, saw a really unflattering photo of myself. And I'm pretty vain, so it wasn't hard to get back into running. But even though I was running every day, I never found that perfect spot to run. I don't own a car, so Belmont Plateau was not someplace that I could go. And I live east of Broad, so the Schuylkill River Trail seemed a little bit too far. I thought I'd be running big loops around South Philly streets forever. And then one day, I ran the bridge. The Ben Franklin Bridge is gorgeous, but I never realized how great it was until running over it. The view of the skyline from the middle of the bridge is the best in the city, and the scenery from the bridge is great too. The backsides of buildings, a baseball stadium, and a nicer than you'd actually think Rutgers Camden campus in New Jersey. I've been running the bridge almost every day this summer. I dread it a little every day, and my shins dread it even more. I only have to go through Washington Square, past Independence Hall, and down Fifth Street to get there. But some days I step onto the walkway, and already I feel defeated. It's steep. The first incline on the Philadelphia side goes up forever, and unlike running on streets, though, there's no opportunity to slack. It's a straight shot to the top, no stopping. And yes, the runner's high from going up and down is unmatched. The Ben Franklin Bridge is this city, beautiful and formidable, underrated and unmatched. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's really nice outside and I'm gonna go for a run. So this is to give you a brief project of my project. Philly Love Notes is a collection of love letters written by Philadelphians, suburbanites, expats, and anyone who's compelled by their connection to the city or compelled by me to actually choose a favorite spot and to write down why they love it. And these spots range from something that's pretty standard, like Rittenhouse Square, to something unusual, like Pete's Clown House in Juniata. Every letter written reflects something about the author and how they interact with the city. No two letters are alike, even if they're written about the same space. The most important part of the project, at least to me, is that I actually try and meet every single one of these love note writers in the space that they've chosen to write about. And so there are now 232 love notes on the website, and I've met almost 175 of these people. This one-on-one interaction offline adds a dimension to the project that has had profound effects on me, and I think and hope has changed how the love note writers and readers see Philadelphia and its residents. So how did this begin? Like many big, ambitious, somewhat initially misguided projects, Philly Love Notes started from a breakup. And it wasn't just a romantic breakup, which it definitely was. It was also a breakup from my home. In the 2.5 years that I've been running this site, my life has changed, Philly has changed, my job has changed, and my outlook on the city has transformed. I grew up in Cheltenham, just 3 blocks away from the northern boundary of Philadelphia, so I like to consider myself a Philadelphian, though that can be debated. And I had been living in Philadelphia on and off for my entire life, but had just returned back from school in New York City and a year of traveling, and I returned back with a partner who would eventually become my husband, and then would eventually become my ex-husband. We bought a house in Mount Airy, made a life there, and then that was gone. No house, no husband. And there were partners after that, but one stuck out in particular, because when it ended, I felt sort of homeless. And this feeling, more than a lack of a partner, made me feel something that was deeply unsettling. When this breakup happened, I realized that I didn't have a connection with Philadelphia. I had family here, but I didn't really know the city, despite being born and raised in its vicinity. I didn't have really close friends, and I was left sort of aimless. unrooted in a city that was technically my home but didn't feel like it. I had a job that I liked and I was good at. I had been managing a neuroscience lab at University of Pennsylvania for 6.5 years, but I felt like the job wasn't really satisfying. It wasn't what I wanted to do in the long run, and I had no desire to get a PhD. I had no desire to run my own lab. And the blog actually started from a random conversation with a lab mate about what we wanted to do that weekend, and just sort of we were wondering what everyone else was doing that weekend. And I feel like there are too many people that say, I have an idea, I'm gonna start a blog. But I actually kind of understand where they come from. There's this need to connect to something larger, and really this seemed like the easiest way. So Philly Love Notes started 2.5 years ago from a breakup, a random conversation, and a crazy idea. And the way that the Love Note meetings work is that we sit, or we walk, or we bike, or we take public transit, and we talk. And we do so in a way that people don't normally talk about Philadelphia. We talk about all the good things, and we talk about why the person is here and why they've remained here and we talk about their lives and their jobs and their friends. And the script is never prescribed. It's always an off-the-cuff conversation between two people, but we always end up talking about why we love the city. And some of the Love Note meetings last minutes. There's a quick exchange before I take photos of someone who's boarding a regional rail train on their commute home. Some of them last hours, like one where I spent with a girl in Clark Park, listening to her talk about coming to Philadelphia with a boyfriend, being broken up with immediately after, and then trying to find herself here in Philly. And she did very, very slowly every day in Clark Park by walking her dog there. And as a hardcore Philly biker who doesn't own a car, these Love Notes have actually taken me all over the city to places that I never imagined biking to. I actually once biked 26 miles round trip just to eat a sandwich with someone up in Chestnut Hill. It was a long bike ride. It was worth it though. And some of these meetings have actually resulted in professional contacts. Others have resulted in best friendships. Some I've never actually seen the person again. One of them resulted in a romantic relationship, which had it worked out would have been fairly storybook. And all of these are published online. And you should really take a look at them if you haven't seen them before, but be prepared to be inspired, to find new places, and potentially even cry a little bit because some of them are really sentimental. And the simple fact of it is that we normally don't get to sit down and have a conversation with a stranger. There's usually some type of networking going on, you're on a date, maybe you're just trying to make some awkward chit chat while you're waiting in line for coffee. And fortuitously, this simple format of Philly Love Notes was really the perfect solution. And every Philadelphian, whether they like to admit it or not, can talk at great lengths about the city. The city itself became the reason why this blog works. And so the blog has been unexpectedly wonderful and incredibly self-serving, which was unintentional but really great. But there's also something that's a lot bigger here. People in Philly have a very complex relationship with the city, to say the least. And I think that we all know this, especially everyone that's here in this room. Everyone, well, almost everyone in the city loves it, is very passionate and dedicated, and perhaps most importantly, is very protective. But at the same time, we can also be the first people to talk negatively about it. And that relationship is clear across Philly's media outlets and social media. It's clear in the conversations that we have with each other and with people in other cities. And underneath all of this is the conflict that people have about truly loving this city. I remember sitting with Ashley Hahn, who is one of the editors of Plan Philly, and we were talking about Philly Love Notes and what it meant, and she suggested that maybe this was a site that was just a source of positivity in the city and that it didn't really strive for anything more. Philly Love Notes exists to change how Philly is talked about. And when you think about it, positivity is not easy. It makes you vulnerable. I've seen people sheepishly admit to loving something here and then immediately taking it back. Just like the love that you have in a romantic relationship, there's a vulnerability that you get when you admit that you love a city. You have to put yourself out there. People may want to do good things in the city, but the conversation has to change first. People need to feel strong when they talk about their relationship to their home. They need to feel protected and secure, or else our conversations will be dominated by snide remarks, cliches, and Philly.com commentators. I found that if you sit a person down one-on-one and give them that space to talk and that platform to talk, that they have the most eloquent things to say. And so I just wanted to read one of the really beautiful love notes that I got from Chris Bartlett, the executive director of the William Way LGBT Center. Since I consider myself more spiritual than religious, it is perhaps strange that I chose a church as the recipient of my love note. But the Episcopal Church of St. Luke in the Epiphany is a special place to me and many others who lived through the worst years of the AIDS epidemic in Philadelphia. This church is a haven, a sanctuary, and a place for restorations and occasional epiphanies. Hundreds of activists have been energized and inspired within its walls, and hundreds of men and women who died of AIDS were eulogized and given the proper funeral within its lofty sanctuary. I fell in love with St. Luke in the Epiphany when I attended my first ACT UP Philadelphia meeting in 1990. ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, is an activist group that has fought to bring the end to AIDS since 1987. Entering into the church, we descend via a grand marble stairway into a meeting space and kitchen where we sit in concentric semicircles to plan strategies to reduce the price of AIDS drugs, bring condoms into schools, improve the situation for prisoners living with AIDS, and help our friends who were living with AIDS get the latest information so that they could survive. And some of us did survive. For those of us who didn't, Reverend Broadley sometimes had to preside over 2 funerals each weekend. St. Luke in the Epiphany conducted funerals for anyone who died of AIDS in the early days when many churches, synagogues, and mosques ostracized their gay members. The Church of St. Luke in the Epiphany, perhaps more than any other building I have known, symbolizes how a successful church, or really any successful building, embodies the community that it shelters and nurtures. The marble bones of this old church vibrate with the energies of so many who have been committed to strengthening the lovely neighborhood and community in its vicinity. The next time you walk down 13th Street past its Corinthian columns, see if you can feel that energy. And you know what? This love letter has changed how I see that church every single time I bike by it. The energy that Chris talks about is there. And that's the other thing. A lot of times these love notes represent something that is very, very personal. A refuge from a bad home life, a new relationship, a place where someone fell in love, a place where an entire community found refuge. And knowing these small bits about the city begins to take on significance. That transference of knowledge and love from them to me and from them to the readers of the blog is what really makes this site important. It's a very safe environment for someone to expose themselves and be vulnerable about what they love about the city. It changes how you think about the city and how you go about living in it. So if I asked everyone in the audience to think about writing a Philly love note, which you would probably start walking around the city and wondering what is worthy of your time in writing. You might think about a building that always makes you smile, a particularly beautiful skyline view, or that certain dish at a favorite restaurant. These all carry a significance that really cannot be undervalued and which need to be talked about in order for us to enact any real change. We need to be vulnerable and embrace and openly love Philadelphia. And so I just wanted to conclude with my own Philly love note. Dear Philly, 3 years ago I talked about how I was going to leave you, escape from an unsatisfying life to pursue a career in one of the West Coast cities of my twin brother or my best friend. Leave you behind and start anew with the hope that a location change would lead to a life change that I desperately needed. I had returned to you after college in a year-long trip around the country. I came back with a boyfriend who would eventually become my husband and a notion that I might want to be a scientist. A house in Mount Airy, a car, a divorce, and another failed relationship all came and went. My job in the lab and an unsettled feeling were all that remained. The origin of this blog depends on my audience. To some, it's an involved side project. To others, it's a way to reconnect with you. And to more, it's a way to meet new friends. The true story, though, this project is a result of a series of life changes that made me realize how much I lacked. I didn't like my job. Most of my friends were my exes. I had nothing to do in my spare time, save for maintaining a shared calendar that detailed your events. The blog was a whim. One day I decided to start it, and by the next week I had it up and running. I stumbled upon a model that, looking back, perfectly fit what I needed most at that time. A time-consuming project, an easy way to meet people, and an excuse to explore your environs. Doing this has challenged and changed what I thought were my fundamental characteristics. The exhausting shyness was gone, the light in me became addicted to Twitter, the ambitionless lab tech became a blogger with outlandish plans and goals. Within weeks of starting, my talks of moving out west diminished, and I no longer woke up dreaming about mountains and craftsman-style homes in Portland. My weekends were filled with back-to-back love note meetings and long bike rides that took me through the backwoods of Fairmount Park and up into the great Northeast. I became engaged with you. It even led me to my current job as the communications manager for the Delaware River Waterfront Corporation, where I actually get to be a part of projects like Spruce Street Harbor Park and Washington Avenue Pier. This blog has allowed me to start needed conversations and eventually enact real physical change in the city. Someone asked me if I really love you that much, and again, I'll answer honestly. I didn't, but I do now. There is something going on here, some sort of stirring. Perhaps it's just a result of becoming more involved, but it seems like you're going through a renaissance. Yes, you'll kick us when we're down, and there are some parts of you that need more work than is even fathomable, but you still love me back. This blog, filled with love letters, and you, filled with a gritty loveliness, have changed me in ways that I never imagined. So this is my love letter to everyone who participated in the project, to readers, to residents, to friends, including Adam, and to my family, like my mom who's sitting here cheering me on, and of course to you, Philly. Love, Emma.